Hello, Electrifiers. Welcome to the very first Electrifying podcast. You asked for it, so we're delivering it, and you may well regret having asked for it in the first place. So we're going to do a weekly roundup of what we've all been up to. And on the podcast this week, it's me, Ginny, and I'm joined by the lovely Nicola,
Hi.
Tom, and Mike. How are we all?
Hello.
Good. Yeah, good. You? So far, so good.
So far, so good. It's going to be more professional than this, mainly because I won't be doing all the technical side again, because I think we've all realised that I'm not very good at it, am I, gang?
You're
This is like a
best.
You got.
I've been trying my best. I've been trying my best. So basically, what we're going to do, we're going to get together, whoever's around every week, and we're just going to go through what we've been up to, our week in cars, the news stories that might have caught our eye over the week, and we'll be getting a podcast up live every week here on YouTube, but also over on your usual podcast platforms as well. So should we kick off with what we've all been doing this week? And maybe, given that this is the first podcast, a little bit of an intro as to who we are, in case people don't watch all our videos here on YouTube. Nick, what have you been up to?
So hi, I'm Nicola. And oh god, well, I've been a bit all over the place the last few weeks. So I went to Frankfurt for the day to go and drive the new Hyundai Kona, and then a couple of days later I went to Norway to go and drive the new Honda ENY1, and then a few days after that I spent the weekend at the Formula E Prix in London.
See, you've been very busy.
Yeah, it's been good. It has been amazing. There are a couple of things that I do want to point out. Number one, the Hyundai Kona is fantastic. Really, really big fan.
Yeah.
Thought it was a brilliant car, really lovely to drive. Number two, the Honda ENY1. I don't know if you noticed, but so the video's actually gone up now. It's on our YouTube channel now. If you have a good look when I'm sort of doing the walk around, you can see the battery underneath the floor. You can see that battery is actually, yeah, you can see it. Because I noticed there was a few comments on it. And actually,
is it a design feature?
I don't know. I don't know if they're basically just using the HRV platform and they're pretending it's an electric platform and then they've just shoved the battery underneath the floor. But it looks like if there's going to be some big speed humps, then you might bottom out the car a little bit once it's driven in the UK.
Okay.
Nicola, one thing I'm really curious about is I saw the slides from the press presentation, but obviously I didn't hear what they were saying. And the slides have all the competitors, which all look cheaper and have more range. How did they talk around that? How did they say, here's an MG ZS, which is half the price and goes twice as far? I mean, what did they say?
What they said was they didn't name the competitors. They just said competitor 1, competitor 2, competitor 3. So you're just kind of left guessing as to who they're trying to talk about. It was a really lovely launch, and the team are so nice, and the car I found reasonably lovely. But the issue with the ENY1 is the price. It starts at 45 grand.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
You put that on our team WhatsApp group, that price, and it literally lit up, didn't it, with us all?
Yeah, ping, 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 ping.
Boom, head swivel. What? It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Okay. So, Mike, what have you been up to? What have you been driving over the last week?
Well, I can't compete with Air Miles Hume in terms of flying everywhere. But I've had a couple of test cars in. Sent back a Volkswagen ID5 and had in an Enyaq coupe purely by coincidence. It's almost as if I should have organised it. And I think Ginny, you and I are both in the kind of Skoda Enyaq. We love camp, aren't we, really? It just reminded me. I kind of think the coupe should have been the car they launched with because it's more aerodynamic, it's way more efficient. But it was just that kind of, I drove to Bristol and it was kind of, it was doing 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour. It was just comfortable. It was the kind of thing I could just spend hours in, and it just did everything right. And I stopped at Molly's outside Bristol, which is a sort of diner place. Well, you've been to the Oxford one, haven't you? I know. And it has a grid serve, rapid charges there. It's a really nice kind of, canteen restaurant kind of thing. It just seemed like the perfect place. And if more places like that exist, then we're going to have no problems at all, are we? So yeah, it was just a really nice weekend. I'd put some serious miles on this Enyaq coupe, and it was just lovely. Yeah, so really, really enjoyable.
Just rewinding to the start of your conversation, I really love the way you said, I sent back a VW ID5.
Furiously sent back. Yeah. Yeah, it was a key for key, but yeah.
Or what did you
Well,
think of it?
Well, it's I kind of liked it, and then I drove the Enyaq, and you kind of think you can't help feeling that somewhere along the line of the production and the design process that the papers got switched, because I'm not saying Skoda should feel cheap inside, but it's an absolute. So you wouldn't expect to get out of a Volkswagen into a Skoda and there'd be a step up in terms of quality. And there's buttons, there's actual stuff. Even the basic things like turning the radio up and down. There's a nice metal kind of scroll wheel on the Skoda, and it just it's tactile. It works. Whereas you're not sort of stabbing this kind of haptic switch on the steering wheel that kind of does four blobs of volume in one go and then back up to one. So yeah, it was just like drinking a glass of cold water when you're hot. It was just lovely getting in this thing, and it was just perfect.
Talking of stabbing at haptic switches, I've been in 2 VW Group cars over the last few days. I drove the tweaked ID3 yesterday, and was incredibly disappointed to see that the slider's still there.
Does it light up?
Slider. No, it doesn't. It's going to light up, but it doesn't light up yet. Like, it's going to get a better screen, but not yet. And it's going to get even better tech, but not yet. So it is tweaked, but there are more tweaks coming. But in big news, it will now. We just joined the sort of the modern age, and you can now get over-the-air updates. So your owners won't have to scurry into the dealers to get updates on the tech. So yeah, it was interesting. It was a good. It's very subtle. It does look a little bit better from the outside. It's always just underwhelmed me a bit, that car. I wanted to love it, and I don't love it as much as I do. And I think it feels like it was rushed through to me. I don't know about you guys, but suddenly Dieselgate happened and they went, oh God, that car that we've got on the planning board, let's get it through, because it seemed to come to market a bit without, obviously the tech on it has been problematic to say the least, but also it just is could be a bit more interesting, a bit more well put together. I don't know, I like it, but I don't love it.
I think I was the only person in the world who actually liked the original ID3. I like the fact that they were trying to do something a bit different with it. I like the white steering wheel and the kind of I didn't like the haptic controls, obviously.
Yeah.
I kind of thought I like what they were trying to do with it, but it's kind of they didn't understand their market, did they? Volkswagen owners want, as when we saw that ID2 that Tom and I think the rest of the team thought, oh God, is that all? And yet when we put that out on Twitter and said, this is really disappointing, isn't it? Almost to a person, every response was, oh no, I love this. This is proper. This is what Volkswagen should be doing. Sensible, normal looking cars in normal colours without kind of this. And I think Volkswagen probably were guilty of not understanding their own market, which is very sort of conservative with a small c. They kind of just prefer stuff to look like cars and behave like it. So I think that was probably why that facelift got rushed through kind of a year early. But
but I think it's fair to say, Mike, that perhaps conservative is not a word we would use for your choice in shirts or your choice in cars.
Well, exactly.
So you are.
I always think that if marketing executives find that I like a car, they probably realise they've made some sort of terrible mistake somewhere along the line. They're not going to sell any. Oh God, Mike likes them. Shit, what are we going to do? So we're going to have to sort of change all that. So.
So come on then, Mr. Barnard, what's been your week in cars? What have you been driving? Where have you been travelling?
Well, you've just reminded me when you were talking about the haptic things that I've been to the Faroe Islands, which are very pretty when it's not foggy, to drive the new Audi Q6 e-tron, which is their new big posh SUV. And it was a prototype, so it was covered in a very kind of gaudy wrap, pink and very Barbie-like actually, with white wheels. And they covered over the dashboard and the fascia and all the instruments because they don't want it to be seen yet. And it's all still secret, which made it tricky to do things like reverse without going into a wall or running over a dog. But the essential switches, obviously, they couldn't cover over. And on the door, there is a bank of haptic switches, which is kind of like double the size of the ID3 ones and does all sorts of things. And actually, I mean, I ran a Cupra Born for a while and I got used to those haptic switches, but I can just imagine Audi people getting in and saying, what are those? I want nice knurled aluminium or something. But I don't know about the rest of the switches on the dashboard and things. I presume
Did they
will be
say
quite
anything
nice.
about what's happening with the wing mirrors or the door mirrors? Are they going to be digital?
Well, I did ask that question and there was some murmuring, and I think the digital door mirrors have died a death.
Have they?
Which
round of applause from us all. Good decision.
I think for a lot of that, we owe the American authorities quite a favour for that, don't we? Because they're not legal in the US, so they have to do, any car that's going to be sold in the US has to be designed and built with glass mirrors anyway. So I think possibly the cost of doing it makes them realise.
I didn't know that.
Has anyone? Yeah, it's, you can't remember. So has anyone tried anything with digital mirrors in the team that they've actually liked? Because I haven't. I've got used to them, but then I've got into a car that's got the glass mirrors, and I thought, oh God, this is so much piece of reflective glass. It's so much better, isn't it?
No, some are better than others. I mean, the one on the Audi, well, it was before it was the Q8, just the e-tron, the SUV, were the worst I've ever tried. And I had to reverse onto my own drive when it was raining in the dark. And I know the way onto my drive, but you just use the mirrors. And I couldn't see. I had to get out and check that I wasn't going to drive into something. I mean, they were just terrible. And it was a gimmick.
The only ones that I thought weren't too horrendous was in the Honda E, because at least they were kind of along the right level of where they should be. Whereas in the Audis, they're putting them in the doors and quite low down. So the eye line is quite strange. But in the Honda E, at least they were kind of along the right line. But in the Honda E, if you're holding the steering wheel where you should be at the turn and two position, you were blocking the mirror. And you couldn't see in the mirror if your hands were on the steering wheel. It's crazy.
I think I did a sum because I was getting a bit geeky and going down a wormhole when I did the Audi Q8 drive. I think it's something like £1,000 option to have them. And I worked out that you got an extra 3 miles for every charge, and it would take like 10,000 years to pay off the cost of having them. I mean, they're just pointless. It's just for people who love gimmicks. And even if they've tried them in the real world, will go, I'll have my glass back, please.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're definitely not. Just going back to the wrap that was on that on the Audi. Do you know? I don't know if any of you know this. That Audi have a designer, and there is somebody in their design team whose job it is just to come up with cool and interesting disguise wraps for their cars. Did that come out in the press conference, Tom?
No, it didn't. No, they were talking about their headlights, though. I'll get onto that in a second. But the wrap was interesting. It wasn't just the normal kind of zebra or something.
There is somebody whose job that is to make sure that that they're eye catching and look good and like disguise the bits on the car that they don't want you to see yet. But it is the job of a person. Yes,
cool.
It's not just give it thought.
They're great because they're inspired by the sort of Second World War dazzle ships, which they used to paint warships into lots of different kind of lines, so you couldn't actually make out what it was. So they could, the enemies could work out there was a boat there, but they couldn't tell what size it was because it had all these lines painted on it. So it's exactly the same kind of construct in terms of how they disguise. I mean, it was easier when they had black bags on them, didn't they, Tom? Back in the old Ultra Express days, we could work out what was underneath them, but with the new kind of the false lines and all the kind of, it's almost impossible to work out what the shape of a car is from that. They're so clever.
I did not know that. So anything, I should tell you what else I've been driving, because I'm taking real world testing really to the max. I spent 8 hours driving the Skoda Enyaq that Mike and I were discussing last week on Friday, which was really not the plan to be in it for 8 hours. It's just the way it worked out. And I've got to say, I can't imagine many cars that I would get out of at the end of 8 hours and not be prepared to perhaps get in and do another journey, which I had to do because I had no food and then I had to go to Tesco in it.
Was that 8 hours of pure driving or 8 hours that included the charging time?
No, it was 8 hours of pure hell. Not to do with the charging, actually, to do with traffic. So it was 8 hours of a lot of being on the M5, stopping, starting, coming back from Cornwall. actually then coming off the M5 and driving around the back of Bristol, because the sat nav thought that'd be a good idea. The charging was the least stressful part of that journey, as was, driving the car itself. It is an incredibly comfortable car to drive, that, isn't it, Mike? I mean, just wow. To do a lot of miles and a lot of distance in it, and it was fully loaded. So I had loaded to the rafters, been down in Cornwall for a couple of weeks, had the dog in the car, a lot of weight in there, and I was still pretty impressed with efficiency. So I think I ended up on that drive back averaging about 3.7, which, considering it was a very full car, I thought was all right. Driving that sort of on more of a mixed, drives around town here, I've been getting like 4.2, 4.3.
It's way more efficient than my Ioniq is.
It's so much more efficient. But just like you, Mike, what I did on that route, I stopped at Molly's Diner, and I almost I don't want us to talk about Molly's Diner too much, because I don't want them to get too busy, because they are such a good place to charge.
Words out.
Was it busy?
Yeah, it was crazy. But you can book
See,
online.
I've always got on a charger there immediately. The food is great. The coffee's great. And actually, I was down in Exeter. So this is both on the way down and on the way back. And I saw for the first time something really brilliant happening at Exeter Services. So the Moto people there had people managing the chargers.
Were they employed by Moto? Were they employed by
GridServe? They were Moto, because it's Moto. So the complicated thing for all of these charge point operators is they often don't own the land that they're operating on. So there's certain things that are a bit out of their control, but Moto were doing it. And they were really lovely. They had two people taking your registrations and your name, and you directed you off to a parking space where you waited, and then they'd let you know they were managing, who was taking turns. I had to wait sort of 10 minutes to get on a charger, which I thought was all right, because the services were mobbed. You were queuing to get in the services. And I had lots of stuff on Twitter going, oh yes, but I'd be straight in filling up with petrol and diesel. And it was like, but yeah, my car was charging whilst I went in and queued 15 minutes to use the toilet. So actually, I know it's a bit more of a pain on a busy, when it's very busy at the chargers. But when you think then it's that dead time when you're inside where your car's topping up. And I was away in 25 minutes, maybe half an hour at the most. And I actually didn't need to stop at Molly's to charge. I did decide to top up. I did it because I'd just been in the car for so long.
Yeah,
and I couldn't cope anymore. I needed to get out. So it was it wasn't a great journey, but it being electric was genuinely the least of my concerns. It was probably better because it was quiet and smooth and nice to drive.
Good. The thought of having someone there that's kind of organising things as well makes it a lot better. I've been to a couple of service stations where where I've had to wait in a queue or whatever, and you end up in a sort of mild panic, like someone pulls up after you. You're like, I hope they realise that I'm first and I don't have to get into a confrontation because I don't want to do this. No. So having someone there at busy occasions is a really, really nice idea. So it's a more calming effect on people that are waiting to charge. Yeah.
Although you can imagine the headline writers already, can't you? Charging companies have to put bouncers in on the chargers to stop electric car drivers fighting.
I want to have a system like they used to have at the deli counters in supermarkets about 20 years ago when you took a ticket. They'd always say to you, 23. I like that system. Those old machines must still be on eBay somewhere. Just get a ticket and then you get called when you're ready.
Do you know the guy who invented that has a huge collection of cars in Potter's Bar? He's got the world's largest collection of Aston Martin Lagondas.
Really?
Well, that's
he invented the machine.
Random but good.
How
you want 4 slices of?
I think let's talk about. Actually, before we do move on, we haven't actually given the podcast a name yet. So we have a very good suggestion from a member of the team. Mike, what do you think we should call our Electrifying weekly podcast?
Well, I quite like the sound of the kilowatt half hour, but given that we're probably about 20 minutes in and we haven't covered anything yet, it might end up being the kilowatt 2 hours at the moment. So, yeah, but I mean, I'd quite like any suggestions would be great because, I've been so far down the rabbit hole of trying to think of names for podcasts. And then I think of one and then I Google it and I find there's 4 already called that. So we probably should have done this a few years ago. But yeah, any suggestions would be gratefully receive.
So
We won't pay you, obviously, but
no, but we'll give you a shout out. And at the moment, we are thinking it's going to be the electrifying kilowatt half hour. So let us know what you think in the comments below. If you like that idea, if you think it's absolutely awful, or if you have a better alternative, that would also be good too.
Yeah. Or if you already do a podcast called the Electrifying Kilowatt Half Hour, let us know as well, because it saves us to sort of, Photoshop one.
Go through solicitors. Yeah.
Right, then let's go on to news, the week's news. Gosh, there's so much journalistically robust, perfectly crafted news about electric cars around at the moment, isn't there? Really well researched, well put together. I don't know.
Are you ready for my favourite headline?
Oh, go on. What's your favourite headline?
That was the one that was on Twitter as we record today. Britain's summer washout goes from bad to worse. Now flooding misery sees electric cars submerged in rainwater, with one woman's brand new 22,000 motor a write-off following torrential downpours and gale force winds. So I don't know if you can see, but it's actually a Renault Captur from, well, that's not brand new. If that was an electric car, we all know it's not going to be 22 grand because it will be way more expensive than that. But that's the Daily Mail going for it and assuming that it's an electric car. Oh.
Didn't the fact that she said it was her electric gearbox that had been damaged give anyone there any of the
Say the word electric?
That's it. Like catnip. Yeah.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Has anybody got any factually correct news stories that have caught their eye this week? Tom, anything factually correct caught your eye? That's,
Well, the Nissan cut the price of the Ariya yesterday, and I thought that was quite interesting because it's now. We always said it was too expensive and it looked pricey compared to rivals, and now it's not anymore. They've lopped £3,000 off the price of the existing models and brought in a new entry level one, which is 39 grand, which is bang up against your beloved Enyaq and a few other cars, sort of top of the range Kia Niro EV. And I've got an Ariya, and I think it's lovely. It's posh inside. And if you're looking at like an ID4, for example, and then you go and sit in an Ariya, you're going to think, well, I mean, this is a completely different world. So, that's going to be an interesting one. The other thing which is really interesting this week is the rise in used electric car prices. So we've been used to them crashing. And for those of us who own them, it's been a bit squeaky. And they're starting to go up again. I mean, it's a slow recovery, but I think that people are looking at the likes of a Tesla Model 3 that's 20 grand and thinking, well, I'll have some of that. And as a result, prices are starting to go up. So if you want a cheap electric used car, buy it now, I'd say.
Just going back to the ID3 tweaked version that I drove, you were crunching the numbers on the finance around that, and there's a really interesting fact that will go in the video when that goes live in, I don't know, next week or so, that you can get an an ID3 for just £3 more a month at the moment than you can an MG4 Trophy on the same sort of deposit and lease terms, which, I mean, it's the price of a very average cup of coffee more a month. I mean, that's quite remarkable how that has gone from big waiting lists to very good finance deals. It's a quick moving market, isn't it, Tom, at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, all the offers, and we get these press releases saying, and even emails this morning saying a £3,000 deposit contribution and 0% finance. And you really have to do your sums, and they have to be based on what you can actually afford. And I think, Nicola, you went on the Astra, Vauxhall Astra launch, and they were saying, oh, well, we've got 0% finance, and that makes the car affordable. But you had to put £12,000 down, then you pay £280 a month for 2 years or 3 years, and then you hand the car back, and that seems quite expensive. But
because everyone's got 12 grand to put down on a car.
Yeah,
I know. I can't believe that after 3 years, you're prepared to have spent 12 or just write off £12,000 plus 270 quid a month. I mean, it's just, I can't see where that would happen.
No.
But if you have got like a car you can trade in, and that's going to be worth, say, £7,000, there are some good deals about, but you really have to play around. I mean, in the comments on the videos, whenever we do any car that's around £40,000, you'll get people going, oh, but you could have a Tesla Model 3. And you can if you're paying cash, but 90% of people don't pay cash. And on the finance, that Tesla Model 3 is £120 a month more than an ID3, for example. And you just need to have a look at what the interest rates are, what the residual values are, and play around. Every website has a finance calculator. See what you're comfortable with, and you'd be amazed at the difference in cars that have apparently the same list price.
And if not, just email Tom, because he has a massive calculator and he sits there in his office, tapping in numbers, doing calculations. That's your happy place, isn't it, Tom?
It is my happy place. I mean, there's strange things like we've got an old Leaf. It's a 2015 Leaf. It's done 55,000 miles. And my wife's like, well, perhaps we should think about getting a new one. And I'm like, well, we could trade this car in, use it as a deposit, pay £300 a month, and then not have a car at the end of 3 years. Or we just keep this one.
A car. But you know, those batteries on old electric cars, are you sure, Tom? So headlines. So go on.
You're going to need to throw in a skip after 5 years, aren't you, Tom? If it's an electric car, the batteries will be... How old is it now?
Well, I looked at yesterday, and it's the car? It's 8 years old. So I charged it full yesterday, and it's 85 miles, which people will go, oh, that's horrible. Good. But it's absolutely fine. We're used to doing 85 miles on a charge.
And we only drive on average, as I've said for a very long time, only around 25 miles a day. So there we go. Mike, let's head to you. What stories have caught your eye this week?
Well, for me, the big one was, it's not necessarily an electric story, but it is an electric story, if you follow what I mean. Volvo aren't going to be selling estate cars or saloons in this country anymore. And that's, this comes in the same year, the same month, the same 4-week period that Ford stopped selling a Fiesta. So if you'd asked you 3 years ago, think Volvo won't sell any estates and you can't buy a Ford Fiesta, you think that's mad, isn't it? How the landscape of the car business has changed so much over a relatively short period. And Volvo, I put this out on Twitter earlier in the week. And of course, Twitter seems to be the sole place where everybody loves estate cars. And everyone's saying what a terrible mistake this is from Volvo. They really shot themselves in the foot. But if you look at the figures, the XC60, which is obviously petrol and diesel, oversell it by 3 times. Sells 3 times as many of those as they do their nearest saloon, which is the S90 or the V90 estate. So there's no business model for making estates. And I know Mercedes are looking at phasing out estates entirely by 2030. But I can see the attraction to them. But I think that the market is just so SUV driven, isn't it? That it makes no sense for them to carry on making estates, which is a shame because I like them, but I understand it.
Makes me sad. I love it. I love an estate. Anybody else sad with that news? Are you sad with that news?
Yeah, I also love an estate, but do I own an estate? No, I don't. I have an SUV. I do. Yeah. But I do. Every time a nice estate goes past me, I do appreciate and I do love an estate. But no, I don't have one. And if they're not selling them, it's a business decision they've had to make. I mean, there will be other places that you will, be able to get your estates from. If you want to get, an MG5 or something like that, then you can still get your hand on one of those, I guess, for now. But yeah, it's just they have to follow business. I'm afraid you can't bang on about your love for them if you don't have one. So I can't say I love estates. I don't have one. So
I haven't. I don't think I've actually owned an estate since the one my dad had in the 70s.
But what I think is interesting is that BMW are doing an i5 estate, or touring, as they'd call it, and Audi are going to do an A6 e-tron Avant.
Which I'm very excited about that car, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be great. It's going to have the same powertrain as that Q6 I drove, and it's going to have a 400-plus mile range. It's going to be incredibly efficient. It's going to charge really quick. I mean, that is... Are we the only ones who are going to be excited by that? I think people will love them. If it gives you an extra 50 miles range...
It's going to be a Skoda wagon.
And given the fact that... and that's it. Given the fact that it's such a core product for Volvo and that other brands are coming out with these really exciting ideas for electric estates or tourings or Avants or whatever they call them, it does seem curious. But yeah.
But I guess it goes on.
It's electric as well, of course.
It is, yeah. I think it's a global market, though, isn't it? China and North America aren't buying estate cars, and if those two markets aren't buying any kind of car, then it won't get built because they just got to look at the bigger picture. They can't just build a handful of cars for Northern Europe who quite like estate cars, It's just, it's an unfortunate kind of payback to the fact that we work in a global, especially with electric, where one model has got to literally sell around the world. I mean, maybe it'll come back when manufacturer can afford cheaply to develop other kind of versions of it, then maybe we will. But it's just a sad day, isn't it, really, when the estate car's gone. The Volvo estate car, that classic staple of the 70s and 80s, has gone.
Yeah. And I think on that rather sad note, the demise of the estates, on that down point, we need to end the podcast. Because if it is going to be...
You can't end on a down.
Kind of on a down.
You can't.
Because if it's going to be the electrifying kilowatt half hour, we've done half an hour.
Oh, no, we can't end on a down note. We can't. No.
Someone must have a positive story.
Okay.
Give us one positive headline to finish on.
Oh, I don't know. Mine wasn't a positive, but it was funny. It's been widely reported, but it was the Guardian actually that just made me laugh. New electric cars won't have AM radio. Right wingers claim political sabotage. So this is the thing, that electric cars struggle a bit with the AM frequencies, and it's a bit kind of, which isn't optimal. So they've decided probably not many people are that worried, so they'll get rid of AM radio. But in the US, where this story came from, there's a lot of sort of more right-wing talk shows and hosts broadcast on AM. And there is now a group that believes that there is a whole conspiracy about this, and it's a way of shutting down the right-wing media. Oh. So that's my point to end on. So we can end on something that is, interesting.
Just put it on digital, it'll be fine.
It's all good. It's all good. Right. Okay. So it was time to say goodbye from all of us. Goodbye. Do let us know what you think in the comments below about the electrifying kilowatt half hour.
I like that.
We like it? Okay. Yeah. If you've got a better idea, let us know. And join us next week. And of course, do like and subscribe and share, because we've got podcasts and we've got videos and all kinds of things heading your way. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.